Buckle up, you guys. We are heading to Australia via phone call to talk psychedelics. But first, let me tell you. The AC Show, officially brought to you by mortgage professional Rebecca Casey with DLC Origin Mortgages. Rebecca has a 16-year relationship with real estate, which helps her understand the entire process of home buying, not just the mortgage part of the transaction. And she was recently nominated one of the top 40 young gun mortgage brokers in Canada. Rebecca is an incredibly caring individual who loves working with young families looking to get into their first homes, as well as experienced buyers. She works with clients from all over and has flexible hours to help cater to all types of people. You'll get top-tier rates, products, and service from Rebecca Casey, mortgage professional with DLC Origin Mortgages. Well, welcome to Season 2 of the AC Show, you guys. I thought I would start it off with a bang, or maybe a better word to describe it would be a trip. So I called up a friend of mine from Australia. His name's Devon. He's an absolute beauty of a guy. You'll hear how sincere he is, how loving he is in his voice. He tells us a bit of the story of his life and what led him to getting into the world of psychedelics and what it's done for his life. So we're talking magic mushrooms, we're talking DMT, ayahuasca, peyote, all these different classic psychedelics that Devon will tell you have been used as therapy and as healing, especially for people with depression and anxiety. This is something I've been very interested in over the last 6 months, we'll say. I've listened to a lot of podcasts about it and started looking up things. It's not something I'm saying I'm going to try anytime soon, but it's definitely piqued my interest. And I did talk to my wife about this already. We had a great open conversation about it. She had some questions and some worries, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you will be wondering, what the heck's going on? Is Andrew turning into a drug addict? And even I had those kind of views on these substances before really starting to look into it. So do come into this with an open mind, and I think there's a lot to get out of this, whether it's an experience you think you want to try or not. There's a lot of really good life lessons, and I think Devon has some beautiful insight into this world of ours. As he said, it's everything that he talks about kind of builds into him wanting to take control of his own life and make it authentically his and not rely on the typical society that we live in these days. He wants to create a more sustainable life for himself, and he wants to help people work through their suffering. It's all going to make a lot more sense when you listen to the conversation. So you guys tune in, open up your minds, and remember, it's just an experience.
It's the Andrew Christopher Show. With Andrew Christopher, your host. It's the Andrew Christopher Show. But really we call it the AC Show. Yeah, we really call it the AC Show. Really call it the AC Show. It's the AC Show. It's the AC Show with AC, your host. Check it out.
G'day, sir.
First off, where are you calling from right now? Is it the tent city you showed me, or what's going on?
It's Tent City, yeah. We're on the western slopes of, Mount Burrell,
Okay.
which is in the Northern Rivers areas of North New South Wales.
New South Wales,
So,
there you go.
Yeah.
And so what brought this up of your, well, living in a tent? You said you're waiting for your house to be built, but this has been a few months now, kind of starting to go off the grid.
Yeah, it's a long story, and I suppose it'll hopefully tie itself together quite neatly, but I think it's something that started boiling away probably from the time that I first drank ayahuasca. So
yeah, really,
it's been 6 years in the making. There's been a few journeys in the meantime, but I think it was September, October last year we finally got the invitation from now a good friend that I'd done some permaculture work with over the years.
Yeah.
And he's, in his late 50s. He's got 3 acres, and not a huge property, but 3 acres on the side of the mountain. And he's invited us to come live with him and carry on the property post him.
Right on. And so
it's
the
all
house
very-
you're building is on that property.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's in a little. He's got a structure that he lives in now.
Yeah.
But what we'll be doing is we'll be building Brett his dream cubby house.
Oh yeah.
On slightly further down the slope, which he'll move into, and then we'll do up the place he's in and gradually move across into the house that's there now.
And so when you say off the grid, like how far away are you from any kind of major city or anything? Or
not too far.
Yeah.
We're sort of 10 minutes from a town called Nimbin, which you may or may
yeah.
not be aware of
I
on
went
your
to
travels.
Nimbin. Isn't it? It's like
course
the
you did.
marijuana capital of Australia, right?
It was. It's
it was.
still, it's still very marijuana friendly, but the stormtroopers in blue have cracked down a little bit, so it's not quite as free flowing as it once was.
Yeah.
But it's still a very non-judgmental sort of place to be, and then probably 40 minutes the other way before we hit anything of substance. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so in your mind, when you say starting to live off the grid, what does that really mean to you? Like, what are the big differences that you're going to be implementing in your life?
Well, technically, literally, we're not connected to the grid. So our power is solar, our water is from the creek. So we are trying to become self-sustaining on this property and not need external inputs, as they say in permaculture.
Yeah. And so that'll be like growing your own vegetables.
Yeah.
Are you into hunting at all? Is there much hunting? What's hunting like in Australia? And are you into that scene? Or?
Look, I'm a bit of a softie, so would the mere sight of a gun kind of doesn't make me feel all that good.
That's all right.
But
that's not a bad thing.
there is hunting, I'm sure. I've heard of people going out for pigs, although that might be a misplaced New Zealand memory.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The Australian government is very controlling, so I'm sure that you need all sorts of permits and need to go to the right place. But that said, there's hunting. I'd like to get into fishing. That's something I can get my head around.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's the next frontier in that sense.
Yeah, that'd be all right for sure. And so water coming from the creek, and then you're
water coming from the creek,
boiling it and using as little as possible. It's good.
It's good, man. So the community we're on, it's like 64 hectares, right?
Okay.
And then that community is then divided up into 16 shares.
Okay.
So there's 16 different properties. They all draw the water from the weir that they've built. I don't know, in the late 70s, early 80s. They built a weir up the side of the mountain.
Gotcha.
So all our piping comes from there. Half of that flow goes to us. Half of that flow goes to another community that's on the other side of the road, about half a kilometre away, which has been tough of late because obviously preceding the fires, it was exceedingly dry. And we were getting down to as little as 10 litres flow per sort of 100 seconds. So you imagine how long that takes to fill up for 16 different houses or 50 different people or whatever. And but now we've had some downpours. It's just forecast rain for the next 10 days, and everyone's stoked, and seeds are going in the ground.
Good. Yeah, you sent me that video this morning, and it looks awesome. Just right in the middle of the rainforest, it looks like. And
we're just sort of at the bottom of it, but it was like living in a cloud. You wake up and you're in a cloud sometimes.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so how about neighbors? Have you met a lot of these people who own the other plots of land up there?
I've met a few of them.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty interesting guy that he was around when the community was set up. So he designed the water system, and it's not a very together community. It's very sort of isolated buildings with very divergent personalities.
Yeah, I bet.
But he's sort of taken a liking to me, so I've gone up and helped him sort of measure the flows and turn off and bleed the pipes up there.
Yeah.
The guy named Peter Pedals,
nice.
Who, if anyone looks him up, he was the founder of the Rainbow Power Company in Nimbin, which I think was the first renewable energy company in Australia.
Huh.
So he's I've had the fortune of spending a few hours and days with him and heard his stories, which has been great.
Yeah. So when you said you were working in permaculture, is that the term you used?
Yeah, look, I wasn't working in permaculture, so to speak. I was, my role was managing and designing work for the Dole programs, which will be possibly a topic we shouldn't delve too deeply into.
Oh yeah.
As to say, like, I wasn't a fan of the policy, but
Right.
anyway, I won't get into that. Yeah, so my job was to put together these work for the Dell programs for 600-700 people, and I tried quite hard to align as much of the funding I could with traditional knowledge, sustainable growing, care of earth, care of people, return of surplus, those sort of ideals that were much more prevalent in Indigenous communities in Australia than they seem to be in the whiter half of the country, if you like.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. And so even back a bit further, I guess, where did you go to school? What were you studying at school?
Well, what age do you want to start from?
I guess any post-secondary education mostly.
Yeah, okay. So I went, after taking a year off in Japan after high school,
Yeah.
I went and registered at Otago University. So I was down the South Island of New Zealand. And I started off studying politics, philosophy, and religion, so what they call the PPE.
Yeah, okay.
I very quickly dropped economics after 1 year and focused mostly on philosophy and political philosophy, with a particular interest in what America was doing to the planet.
Yeah.
And sort of developing resources to advocate for those that perhaps haven't had it so fair in this life.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And so that's kind of, I guess that's a big factor in leading you to wanting to live this kind of off the grid lifestyle and self-sustaining and that kind of
I
stuff.
think so.
Yeah.
It marries up with the conversation around psychedelics for me, because I still very much see them as two sides of the same coin. And we can get more into permaculture in terms of how I view that. A lot of people are probably thinking that either haven't heard of it or think it's a type of gardening.
Yes. So do you want to quickly define it now? Permaculture?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So permaculture, as I view it, and I can just sort of start with the three ethics. There's only three ethics, basically, that permaculture is derived around, and it's what I said. It's care of people, so making sure that your actions are aligned with the care of your community and the wider community and yourself.
Yeah.
Care of the environment, so that with which we need to sustain ourselves, make sure our actions are promoting a healthier, more resilient, sustainable future. And then the third is simply that once you've secured the first two, any remaining energy, you reinvest into those two ethics. So you spend your life not doing the bullshit, I suppose. Yeah. There are a number of principles and observations that Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, has outlined, and a lot of other people have put work into the field. But for me, it really is about taking ownership for that with which you consume and ensuring that it doesn't come from places where abuse or exploitation is taking place. Just really taking responsibility.
Is this kind of permaculture, is it a worldwide accepted term, or
once you put a term out there into the internet world, people are going to put their own meanings on it. But in terms of using the words of the man who created the system, or who was at least half responsible for it, it's a political action that's lined up against the abuses and corruption that we're seeing in our global systems.
And Bill Mollison is an Australian.
He is an Australian.
Yeah.
Yes, he is. He's a Tasmanian man, I believe, but he actually passed away 2 years ago. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha. It's a term I had not heard before. That's why I was a bit more interested in defining it and seeing what it was.
By all means, look it up. It's a world of awesomeness.
Yeah, and
the guy who owns the property we live on.
Yeah.
In the late 70s, he got his PDC, his permaculture design certificate from Bill Mollison, and knows the family well. So there's a nice little link there for me at the moment. Yeah,
that is really cool. Someone you can, I'm sure a couple of those guys who live around you there, it'd be pretty interesting to sit down and pick their brains about their
almanacs of knowledge.
Yeah, I bet. Did you get a degree from, was it Ortega, you said?
No. I broke up with a girlfriend and continued to drink and party substantially for 2 years of not working.
Okay.
And then basically dropped out when I couldn't handle my emotions. But I was fortunate enough that during that year I mentioned in Japan in 2001,
Right.
I spent 3 weeks going back to the States, where I
Okay.
worked for 2 weeks at an airline company over there, a private airline parts company. And at that moment, about 2 weeks later, he offered me a management apprenticeship. So I went over to the States and spent 6 months training in LA. And then life sort of just went from there.
Yeah, went from there. I guess skip ahead a few years until when we met, which did we figure out was 2007, 2008, somewhere around there?
Well, late 2008 is when I moved to Australia. So yeah, it would have been in the preceding year, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So most likely late 07 or 08, whenever it was you were in Wellington.
Yeah, somewhere around there. I guess I could figure that out. But
That was right after that. So I basically, when things ended in the States, I moved back to Wellington because that's where some close uni friends were.
Mhm.
And I was there for 3 years, which is when we ran into each other there.
Yeah. And we didn't really hang out or anything. Hey, me and my buddy just crashed at your place for a night or two.
Had some beers in the lounge, I think. But no, you were a pretty pleasant dude to hang around, and could tell that you're a decent guy and a good singer.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah. But we didn't get too deep into any life conversations or anything. It was just a quick in passing. Stayed at your place a couple nights and then continued on our way. But then I think it was like when we had each other on Facebook forever or whatever, and I think it was just a couple years ago, maybe a year ago, I saw this video you posted, and you were just super emotional. I could see it looked like you were almost crying, and you just had these words of love and acceptance and how great you were doing, and I watched that.
And you told me to get some sleep.
No, I don't know what I said, but I just looked at it. I was like, whoa, something's really going on with this guy. And so I started messaging you, and we started talking a little bit here and there, kind of reconnecting. And then it was brought to my attention that you were experienced in this world of psychedelics. And it's something
quote unquote experienced. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is nice. I think, like I mentioned to you, for my listeners, you wouldn't call yourself an expert. You're not going to have all the answers, but you do have some experience in this as, maybe an intermediate instead of a beginner, like maybe some people listening or people who don't know anything about the subject.
I would like to think that I'm starting to understand some of the scope of this area. But if I called myself an expert, no one would serve me the medicine ever again.
No. So for me, it's just been a couple, recently, maybe 3 or 4 months that I've really started listening to podcasts and opening my mind up to this world of psychedelics and psychotherapy, and it's just really intrigued me, and so I'm really excited to hear kind of your experiences, why and how you got into it, and what it's done for you since you have had these experiences.
Yeah, sure. So you just want me to launch into it, eh?
I think so. And we'll probably if it starts getting really heavy, we'll take a break and do something a bit more lighthearted. But I think actually I was feeling actually kind of nervous about this episode, which I've done I've done quite a few now, but this one I'm very interested in, and I just want to get the most out of it that I can. So I guess, to start, where did you go from 2008, or where after we met? And then you moved from New Zealand to Australia. Yeah. What happened there? And then take me on a journey from there on.
So I think when I was in Wellington, I'd had another crack at going back to uni and finished a few more papers. But really, what it felt like to me was that I was just performing a book review. Like I was paying thousands of dollars to read a book and have someone else tell me whether I understood what I read or not. Mm. So it all started to feel a bit silly. We were just falling into the same old traps that you do, hitting the piss every weekend, working in jobs that didn't really provide much satisfaction. And a friend of mine who was in Wellington, we sort of decided that we were going to go traveling. And we were going to do South America and maybe parts of the Mediterranean, and we started organising to do that. And a couple of weeks out from organising tickets, he was offered a job that he really wanted, and he committed to it for 2 years, and that option went out the window. And at the same time, or very, very similar in time, my mother went through some difficult times, and I won't get into details because that's her business. But she was going through some trauma, and she and her partner moved to Australia, and I decided to head back up to Hawke's Bay, where I grew up in New Zealand, and sort of just be around family, help out with the move, and then eventually decided, you know what, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just going to go over with them. I lived then with them in Warwick, Queensland, which is, excuse my French, but butt fuck nowhere.
Okay, gotcha.
Around some pretty simple-minded folks that wasn't very easy for me to integrate with. It was all right, you know. It was hot. I played cricket. Still drank, and then I think just before my birthday in 2010, I managed to get myself a job in Brisbane, working for a stock feed company. So I moved up there in 2010, bought a car, got an apartment with some trendy folk in West End. If anyone knows Brisbane, it's still a pretty nice place. It's getting a bit fancier now.
Yeah, I liked Brisbane when I was out there. I thought it was one of my favorite cities, actually.
It's a really livable city, hey?
Yeah.
Like, it's not too built up. You can navigate it without too much ease. It's as far as cities go,
yeah,
I'd rate it pretty highly in Australia. But look, I suppose, and then I worked for this company for like two years, and I kept sort of working my way up. I was offered a promotion, and you know, as kind of a celebration, I went over to Europe for 3 weeks. First holiday I'd had since I'd basically moved over to Australia, which was great. But when I came back, you know, even though things were going well, there was just this emptiness, you know, like it was hard for me to go into work. When I was in those moods, I didn't want to be around other people, and it was challenging because even though I'm aware that it was depression-y, anxiety stuff, it wasn't that hit you in the face, want to cry all the time anxiety. It was just mild paralysis that continued, and basically eventually got called into the office at my work, where they kind of started off by saying that, you know, this is not about your performance. You know, you've been doing really well. We really like the way your mind works, but it's not going to work out, and we're going to give you 3 months to find another job. And that sort of hit me pretty hard. Like, I felt like I was being told I'm getting fired because I'm depressed. And to this day, I still feel like that's what it was. And in that position, I was a New Zealander in Australia, so I don't qualify for any government assistance when I'm not working. And I was scared. I thought I was going to have to leave my then partner, go back to New Zealand where I don't have a life. So I was, after a month of feeling pretty rock bottom, I kind of managed to balance out and find myself a job at the markets, the Brisbane markets in Rocklea, where you work from 1 a.m. till 10 a.m, 6 days a week.
Oh, really? What kind of work?
Mate, stacking pallets.
Yeah, okay.
Just shipping them out so trucks are picking them up. Just really manual work.
Yeah.
Got me in good shape. Lost about 30 kilos. Went down from 120 to about 90. And I ended up, on a decent sort of wage, earning 65,000 Australian a year for pretty mindless work. But it was really damaging to my social life. Again, here come the parents with an opportunity to do something different. So for my mum's 60th birthday, her partner wanted to surprise her by flying me over to Vietnam, where they were staying for 3 weeks.
Nice.
And I just got a one-way ticket over there. So look, I went back to Kununurra, a place called Kununurra with them after that. It's basically one of the most remote places on the planet. It was 500 kilometers to the next town of substance. And that place was where a lot of magic happened.
Really?
The first year was very hot. My first wet season there, we got to 43 degrees every day for 6 weeks in a row.
Wow.
So you kind of get baptism by fire, quite literally.
Yeah, jeez.
But some really fascinating things started to develop. So I kind of, I had a university friend who had been up there, and I was fortunate enough to catch up with him in Brisbane before I left, and he put me in contact with one person in Kununurra. I won't give his name, but we were not really on the same page for the first year. I kept trying to like figure out a relationship with this guy, and it just didn't happen. But sort of around the time was fortunate enough to get into this indigenous community work, I sort of all of a sudden had something to talk about with these people that were interested in permaculture and healing and living more authentic lives, and started to develop a friendship with this guy. And I remember very clearly one day when I was in Kununurra being at his house, where he just out of the blue said, "Would you like to try DMT?"
Yeah.
And I was aware of it. I had a fairly good understanding of what people used it for, but I knew it was a daunting sort of thing, like not to be taken lighthearted.
It's a big deal. So DMT is what's in the ayahuasca tea.
Yeah, so
it's a psychedelic.
dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah, okay.
It's an interesting compound. It's I'm just going to state it. I don't know if there's debate, but I don't think there should be. And I'm not one for reading a lot of science articles.
Yeah.
But DMT is endogenous to your body.
Yes, that's right.
Meaning
it's
that
in everything almost.
But different to other psychedelics. Although some psychedelics like psilocybin, etc., are very similar in their chemical makeup to DMT.
Mm-hmm.
DMT, your body knows what to do with, you know what I mean? Like that's why the experience can be so quick if you don't drink it with an MAOI, because your body starts breaking it down immediately.
Okay.
So smoked DMT will probably last about 5 minutes. When you combine smoked DMT with sufficient MAOI, it can last 10, 20, 30, and up to 40 minutes if
I've got my hand up.
MAOI.
I've got my hand up with a question, but you can't see me.
Yes, question, sir. You in the back.
MAOI.
Yeah, don't make me pronounce it. Basically, okay. MAO is how your body breaks down DMT.
Yeah.
Amongst other compounds. It's also why, because you're drinking it, the I is the inhibitor. So essentially, it's tricking your body into allowing the DMT to stay in your system for longer.
So this is what you mix DMT with, or?
Yeah. So if you're drinking ayahuasca, what you're drinking, or let's say ayahuasca analogs, because ayahuasca is a specific set of plants.
Okay.
You can create a similar effect with different plants. What you need in the mix is a plant that contains DMT and a plant that contains an MAOI.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
There is a third option, which is called Changa, and that's what I was sort of referring to by mixing the smoke with an MAOI. So you can put DMT with ground up, I shouldn't give a chemistry lesson on how to make it. It's all available online. Yeah. But basically you can combine the two and then you can have a smokable form that lasts longer as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
What I first smoked was probably that, but a very highly concentrated version of it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, getting back to where I was, when this guy made the offer, I had to go home and have a little think about it, just to make sure that I was prepared. And I think I've settled on the fact that, look, it found me, and I want to have that experience. So I went back to his house later.
How was it presented to you? Like you said, you should try this because, or hey, look at what this did for me. You know what I mean?
So for him, these substances had been a lifesaver.
Yeah.
He, back in the day, had some distinct issues with other substances and lifestyles that were not beneficial for him. And through work with these substances, he has become an absolute shining light. He is a community activist. He's living the path that he wants the world to be, and he just wants to share that with other people. So for this person, it's a constant conversation.
Right. Okay.
That's the life he's living.
Yeah.
So that offer, he when I accepted, he took me into his house, did some hippie stuff with the feathers and the smoke and a little bit of sound just to center and kind of feel clear of any negative energy that you're taking in. Mm-hmm. And we sat down in his backyard. After a bit of conversation, he was aware of my issues with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
For sure. So that was all building towards this. He basically hands me a pipe and says, right, well, you're going to take a long draw, hold it in for as long as you can, breathe it out. If you're up for it, do that again. And then if you're really brave, do it the third time. So there seems to be a thing about the number 3.
Yeah.
What happened then was pretty much a life changer. Like, even though we didn't talk deeply, you probably picked up that I'm a bit in my mind.
Yep.
Like, I can think things through. But one of the things that I've always struggled with is being able to connect those thoughts to an actual feeling. You know, like you can understand something, but it feels hollow. It doesn't feel like it sinks into your bones. And anyway, so I managed to take a pretty pathetic first drag on this pipe while we were in his backyard. But as I breathed it out, I was looking up into this circular clearing in the between the trees, and this shimmering force field up in the stratosphere just instantaneously emerged, sparkling, like integrated completely with what reality was. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
At that moment, what was to come was a bit more astonishing. So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, I think I'll just try and get used to this before I take a second one. And he very wisely told me that you won't get used to it.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to do it now. So the second drag toke that I managed to take was a very large inhalation. And as I breathed that out, this vortex from the force field just sort of started pouring in straight at me. And as it came, it was sort of pulling reality along inside with it, if you can imagine what that might look like. I don't know.
Probably not, but I'm trying.
Yeah, look, it was the intensity. It started gathering pace, and he asked if I wanted a third one. I was just like, nope, this is going to do for now. Got off the seat, lay down on the ground. And as I lay down with my back on the ground, this vortex just kept tunneling in at me. And at some point, the reality I was faced with my eyes open, were these shadowy trees. Let me know if this rain gets too distracting as well.
No, I'm loving it, actually. I can hear it, and it's awesome. I think
awesome.
It sounds so nice. Yeah.
Just sitting here with the puglet, the little pug dog sleeping on the mattress with the rain.
Yeah, it's great.
Anyway, so yeah, look, it's just, I don't know what's relevant to other people, but I suppose just for this story, I've kind of told it so many times, I may as well stick with it.
Yeah.
Basically, what I was confronted with is all the trees had turned into shadow monsters and were trying to pull me into the ground.
Yeah.
That was quite terrifying.
I can imagine, yeah.
At the same moment, and anyone who listens to Terence McKenna will have heard this as well, all the air seems to be getting sucked out of the room, or wherever you are. It becomes harder to breathe. You really have to start focusing on your breath. And I had to just repeat to myself, there's nothing to fear, you'll be okay. There's nothing to fear, you'll be okay. There's nothing to fear, you'll be safe.
It's just an experience, right? And I think a lot of people who try and explain these experiences, but unless you've had one yourself, it's just unbelievable almost, right? I think that's kind of a common.
I mean, how's someone gonna believe these stories? It's exactly, it needs to be experienced for it to really make any relevant sense to the person. Otherwise, it's just laser lights and smoke and mirrors, you know. But what I found is that I got too overwhelmed by what was going on, so I closed my eyes. That was
bad idea.
Yeah, well, it wasn't better. Basically, I had the same physical or visual construct happening, except it was now in the dark, and instead of this vortex pulling trees in towards me, it was bringing every violent, flashing neon light you could possibly think of at me at what seemed like the speed of light. It just kept tunneling at me in a very intense fashion. And it was through this process that I kind of, at one point I think I may have opened my eyes again to have a break.
Yeah.
And realized that, these shadowy tree monsters pulling me into the ground are not so bad. It's a welcome break from these lights.
Yeah.
These mechanized neon things.
Yeah.
And as I closed my eyes again, that intensity was still present, and the lack of air was still really noticeable. I was really having to expand my breath and really take effort to fill my lungs. But as that intensity was happening, these stresses that floated in my life, the things that I worried about, would come in one by one and be absolutely pathetic compared to the intensity I was going through. And they literally felt like they flew off the shoulder. And one by one by one by one, they dug themselves down to where it gets sort of down to the base level fears, which is, I won't speak for others, but I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I'm scared. And even then, at that point, the intensity of the trip had broken. And I was in this amazing chamber of iridescent colors and just beautiful soft lights where I started to not be aware of my body and just really be present in this place. Where, to be honest, initially I couldn't notice a whole bunch going on. It was just really nice and calming, and I wondered how I might... Tent's just collapsing.
Shit.
That's all right. Every time... We've got one of those air pole tents.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So every time the air pressure changes, it just sort of drops.
Oh. We're just getting to the good part. Hang on.
I know, right? It's like, maybe, it's a sign. Yeah. Anyway, where was I at? So, then I look over to the left of this orbital space that I'm in. And it's like a 5-year-old kid had drawn some cubes, just badly drawn lines, cubes, maybe 6 or 7 of them, just rotating around like a merry-go-round on the other side of this void. And as one comes around, there's this door that's been drawn, and it's being held open by a green stick figure lady. And people talk of these Mother Ayahuasca presenting herself to me. It must be where I was at emotionally that I get a kid's version of it. So I'm assuming pretty juvenile state. But she wasn't saying anything. She was just beckoning. It's like, if you would like to come here, the door's open. And as that sort of happened, there was a moment. I didn't manage to make it through the door, although I tried.
Right.
I wanted to go there, but I didn't know how to navigate the space. I didn't have legs. I don't have a body. How do I get from point A to point B? I haven't been trained in this. But somewhere in that moment, I experienced a time when I was not in my body. I was not in my breath. I was just consciousness. And to me, that was the counterpoint from all that psychotherapy, all that thinking. I now have, and will always have, a moment with which the feelings connected to the thinking.
Right.
And that, I think if people take a moment to think about what that is in terms of their life, is an immensely therapeutic experience to have. It's a real anchor with which to go forward in your life, or in my life. And I've thought about it many times, because that sort of feeling is the closest to an undeniable truth that I've experienced. So when I've talked a lot. So
no, that's great. Can you just repeat that feeling? I just want to make sure I got that again, that part. So what was that feeling of connecting yourself to consciousness, or how did you put that?
At one point, I was no longer attached to the meat sack, if you like. I was not in my body. I was not consciously breathing anymore. I was just there in this void. And it was magic. It was absolute magic. It felt like reconnecting to something very familiar and very safe. And in that place, none of my earthly worries existed.
Right.
It felt like maybe me.
Yeah.
But for an overthinker, that was the most nourishing experience that I'd had up to that point of my life,
And so,
without a doubt.
and so now it's not about really living in that state of consciousness the rest of your life. It's being able to at least remember that feeling and trying to emulate that in is a sober life the way to put it. You know what I mean?
Oh, look, I still fuck around with things that are fun,
Yeah.
but they don't control my life
Yeah.
the way that they have done in the past.
Yeah.
And look, I think in this space it's really important that I don't try too hard to create an objective realm of describing these places, because each person is going to respond differently, and each person may have a different path that they want to follow. For me, up to this point, it still seems about bringing back what's useful to my day-to-day life. So I'm the Taurus. I'm quite a grounded person to the point that it's painful. It takes a lot to change my mind. It's taken a lot for me to open up my mind to think about the world and existence differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, up to this point, I haven't been interested in sort of becoming a yogi that sits on top of a mountain and breathes in all the negative energy and pumps out good energy. You know, like I haven't gotten that call.
No.
I want to put things in the ground and help people that are suffering. But that's largely because that's been my life, and I want to be able to provide the support that I found missing in mine to whoever that resonates with.
So after this experience, did you write all this down? Is it a clear
No.
memory you didn't need to write down, or like?
No, I'm not much of a writer, but I kind of do create sort of check-in points with these types of memories.
Yeah. Okay.
So I because I now do a lot of this. Well, I'm around a lot of people doing this work.
And
so a
that's
lot
the
of
main
my
thing
conversations focus around these things.
So your buddy that you did it with first, he would have stayed. He would not have smoked with you, right?
No, he did not smoke with me. He was there as a sitter.
Yes.
And actually, to be honest, with not too much time had passed before he thought that I was absolutely fine. I think it's when I cracked up laughing.
Yeah.
At the sheer stupidity of all my former stresses.
Oh yeah. Maybe let's talk a bit about the importance of the sitter, or someone who's there to kind of help guide you through this, or is that kind of what it is, or keep you safe, or what are the reasons to have a sitter?
Oh, depends what your view on reality is, I suppose.
Yeah.
Look, I think in the first instance, there are physical reactions people can have to these substances. And it's important to have someone there that knows what to do if that happens. It's important for someone inexperienced to be well aware of what they can and can't ingest in these experiences, because there can be some serious complications. If you're ingesting an MAOI and you're ingesting lots of foods with, I think it's tyramines in it, or tyramine, you can get serotonin syndrome and you can die.
Yeah.
That's a very practical consequence of not doing it right.
Yeah.
But also, I think some people have met unfortunate ends when they've wandered off into the bush in these states, and they might walk off a cliff. You need to do these things as responsibly as you would do any other medical procedure, I think.
Yeah.
Although I hate kind of referring to it as any medical procedure.
Yeah.
Further down the line, you get people that become worried about other realms, so entity work and the rest. But I don't think that's of much relevance to most people who haven't started this sort of path.
Right. Okay. That's the importance of having a sitter, someone who's there with you, who's not going through an experience or taking the psychedelic, so that they can help keep you safe.
It's interesting. I was just reading an article by Julian Palmer on the internet, which maybe I'll send you a link and you can include down in the bottom of the show.
For sure.
And he describes who should be serving ayahuasca.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of person should be serving. And that's been very useful for me as someone who's thinking about doing that in the future. But I also read it as a great tool for people who are trying to choose a sitter.
Yeah.
because there are a lot of people in this industry that are not got other people's best interest at heart.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people who have reached false plateaus and believe they have all the answers and start trying to shape other people's experiences. And I think you want to avoid those people as much as you can.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of talk on, well, some of the podcasts I was, when they talk about concerns or whatever, and it is these, since it's illegal in the States and in Canada, then it's a lot of underground people performing these experiences or sitting with you. And you know, the hope would be that you get people who have been trained in this type of work, you know, even psychedelic psychotherapy or psychotherapists who have, you know, gone through some experiences and some training who can help guide you to get the best experience out of this that you can.
Precisely. And if there was one factor that sort of should define who that person might be, I don't think the clinical training is all that advantageous.
No. Interesting.
You really want someone who doesn't bring their shit into that space.
Right.
And that's part of Julian's article, that they're not doing it for themselves, that they're transparent with what they say to you, that they're open and honest, and that they feel like a good person.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate to drink with people that have clearly not been in it for themselves. And that has made my path a very enjoyable one.
Yeah. Do you have some experience as being a sitter yourself?
I've facilitated Changa and DMT for people. I have not facilitated ayahuasca for people.
Okay.
It's a space that I am looking towards doing, but I don't feel like I'm quite there yet. I've still got some of my own work to do, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to after that first experience that you had. What, you know, the following months and the next year, what did you see in your life change?
Pretty much transformation across the board.
Everything.
At that time, I was working as what they labeled a waterman. So my job was to take the main channel of water that's in Kununurra, which runs off of Lake Argyle, which is a large freshwater lake up in northern Western Australia.
Okay.
So my job was to divert the water in the channel to the farmers that needed it.
Yep.
And Groundhog Day, rest, rinse, repeat, you know, over and over again. Beautiful country to do that work, but not very engaging.
Yeah.
I was feeling pretty stuck. I was feeling like I was 30, had no discernible social circle that was living near me. I wasn't very confident. I spent my 30th birthday in bed by myself, kind of in a funk. I didn't feel like I was going to be desirable to any woman that was, you know, worth a damn, if you like.
Yeah.
I was pretty messed up. I was pretty lost. Following that first experience, it took 5-10 years of stress off my shoulders overnight. I was a lighter person. I was a happier person. I kind of had a few more experiences with DMT in the following months and was also offered to go and drink ayahuasca with the same person.
Right.
So I went out and drank with him, which we can get into in a bit if you want. But basically what shifted into my life was that a work colleague basically told me that he should apply for a job at his wife's work, which was the community project manager for the local job company that worked with about 600 Indigenous people. I got that job. I became proud of what I was doing. I became engaged in what I was doing. I felt good at what I was doing. I was able to lift a funk out of my life, stop smoking as much weed, spend more time outdoors, being able to sit still, present, and enjoyable in nature, which is not something that I'd been able to do before. And then, it was actually reconnected to some artistic ability for once in my life.
Oh, yeah.
Which was really interesting. I'd never been able to draw a stick figure. And why I say interesting, because this has just recently come up for me in quite an obvious way, but my father was a painter. He
Okay.
basically painted flowers.
Huh.
And he left when I was 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there, and became a homeless drug addict.
Huh.
And I've never been able to tap into that artistic side. So these experiences unlock something quite profound that eludes me at this moment. I'm not connected to those abilities right now.
No.
But it's an interesting experience and path. Things became what they call like quite synchronistic. Things just unfolded in very easy ways. It was beautiful.
And so, do you have a recollection of most of these experiences that you had? Are there some
Generally,
that you would say were more important than others? You know, being probably the
oh,
first one.
definitely so.
And
There's been some more profound ones since.
yeah,
Yeah, but definitely the profound experiences I have a recollection of. Maybe not to the nth degree, but definitely the sort of paradigm of what was happening.
yeah,
There's some I tend to forget, but just like anything, it's like someone triggers a memory and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, and you can get into it. But I have a pretty good recollection of my mushroom, cactus, ayahuasca, and DMT experiences.
yeah. And so, during those experiences, what, like, if you could put it into more, I don't know, just everyday terms, what do you think was happening with these stressors, like you're talking about, just kind of bouncing off you and going into the ground? What types of stressors or what types of things do you think you've worked through because of these experiences? Or
Hopefully, what's happening is being able to let go of some of the traumatizing events of my past,
right,
and some of those traumas are quite obvious, as I'm sure you know better than most.
mm-hmm.
But some of those traumas are sitting there from when you don't have a memory, from when you're a child and you like needed a hug and it took them 2 seconds to get long and to get too long to get to you.
Yeah,
All these things tend to, I've taken great pleasure in listening to Dr. Gabor Mate's talks.
okay,
And I'll send you a link for him to include as well, because I think he's a brilliant resource for people to kind of start understanding
yeah,
what this work is about and how it links up with quite established and successful means of therapy. So yeah, I think hopefully what I'm doing is being able to let go and learn to not try to control the uncontrollable.
right,
We as humans seem to want to be able to think that we can master nature and the environment, and it's good luck to you.
right, yeah,
It's a pretty big place out in the universe, and we're not in control of all that much of it in a physical sense.
yeah. So, and yeah, that is a big thing that I always hear about are these traumas. And I think, from some things that I've heard is that hoping these psychedelics can act as an anti-trauma, and that traumatic experience happened and it shifted your brain. And they're hoping that these psychedelics are shifting it back the way it was almost before this trauma occurred.
I would say that is part of the work that they are doing with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think personally that's what kind of interests me so much is because I know I've got a lot of shit I've dealt with, even mainly I would say with my daughter Lily Jean, who passed away. And it's something you feel like maybe, okay, I've dealt with it, I've kind of accepted it, and I'm living a good life. I've got a beautiful family, I'm working hard, making money, but it's one of those things that I don't think how much it's affected you until maybe an experience like this where you can actually let it go and then and kind of move on from it.
Well, firstly, I want to say, because I haven't had the opportunity to say it out loud to you, I know I messaged you at the time, around the time, but the way you handled that, like that more than anything, is why I think we're still in touch the way we are. I think that you were incredibly inspiring through that period, and I think you should be really, really, really proud of yourself
Thanks,
about
man.
how you managed to do that, because listening to that song, which I did before coming on the podcast, still makes me cry, like in a really beautiful way. So thank you a lot for what you've done.
I'm just thankful that her story kind of lives on and has touched so many people, and I mean, it was an impossible thing to deal with, and I think that's something I'm looking for a lot of answers to. Yeah.
I think if the strength that you showed would suggest to me that you will be absolutely fine if you decide to go down this path.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these medicines are not beneficial for everyone.
Yeah,
I
let's
think that
talk a bit about that.
I think there are some people that just will not yield control.
Right.
That they're either too deeply hurt or they're not ready. And they tend to have very difficult experiences. It's not that those experiences are necessarily bad. They may well end up being a hugely beneficial part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But it can also be, for anyone facilitating that kind of work, it would be a big commitment and probably contain a high level of risk.
Mm-hmm.
And, by no means are psychedelics the only means of successful therapy. For some people, learning how to do yoga is all they need.
Yeah.
Or, taking the time to go for a half-hour walk a day is what they need to kind of clear their mind and move forward. And some people talk to therapists, or you can use a whole bunch of methods combined in a big blender and hope that you get somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is probably more my approach.
Hey, before I forget anything, so we talked about kind of some of the risks being, you going on a trip and you're on your own in the woods, or you jump off a cliff or you're something, that's an obvious risk. But what about actual risks health-wise, like to your body, to your brain? I'm
not an authority on this. I think if anyone is thinking about taking these substances, then they would do well to do their research on those issues.
Yeah.
I think, if anything, because when you're in those spaces and it gets really intense,
mm-hmm.
you need to be able to, as much as possible, know that you're safe, because it doesn't feel safe sometimes,
Yeah, and that's a big part of the sitter, choosing someone you're comfortable with.
The whole environment, what they call set and setting, and that refers to the physical environment, the emotional place you're in, the work you do pre-ceremony, whatever you need to do to get into that headspace where you can try to essentially let go.
Yeah.
The physical sense, I think this might be more pronounced when you smoke DMT, but it can increase your blood pressure.
Okay.
But I've not, this is in sort of the 6 years of which 3 of those have sort of been relatively involved in the scene. I've not come across many tragically bad situations. I was at a ceremony where a woman tried to get up in the middle of it, got into her car, and tried to drive off.
Right.
So that would be a concern.
Yes,
maybe in the future,
course.
take people's car keys off them.
Yeah.
But no, that's.
But as far as something like, which I think a lot of people are probably wondering, could they overdose taking mushrooms or taking DMT, this kind of thing, like you would with a classic drug like cocaine? You hear about overdoses on cocaine all the time. But as far as my understanding is, there's not a toxic level that's been found of these drugs.
That is also my understanding, but I would again encourage people to do their own research.
Yeah.
But these, to me, the drug as a term is a farcical explanation of what these are in my mind, even though we can't say this because of whatever laws there are. These are medicines that have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunate. My understanding is a lot back in the States, they were doing lots of research and studies on it, 60s into the 70s, and then the government shut it down because of the culture surrounded by a lot of these people using these drugs.
Timothy Leary and the whole tune and drop out sort of sensation. Yeah, there was a culture war that sort of was being fought along these lines, and at that time the other side won.
Yeah, and so I think that's why they got classified as these drugs along, hand in hand with something like cocaine or heroin, and it's all, that's honestly, until a couple of years ago, that's probably where I was at. I was like, oh no, I would never do magic mushrooms. I could die.
And you'd be a bad, dirty hippie.
Exactly, yeah, or something like that.
Look, I think if people want to look into that background, they should look into the UN Accord on psychedelic substances, which I think as you dig into, you'll find that it was a politically motivated action originating in America, from which a lot of political pressure was placed on other countries to follow suit.
Yeah.
And that's when sort of the research was shut down. People like Rick Strassman were, able to get some studies done, but there wasn't much support, and it wasn't really pursued in the scientific realm until, as you say, much more recently.
Yeah. And so, as you were saying, these are substances that have been used thousands of years. Can you talk about a few of the cultures that mostly have used, and why they've used them, or what they've been used as, like, coming into manhood?
An initiation.
Yes, an initiation, that kind of thing. Do you know many? So where's ayahuasca is predominantly came from Southern America?
So the Amazon is I suppose the home of ayahuasca as such, because, and it's going to be embarrassing because I'll get it wrong because it's never really been a point of interest for me, but basically with all the hundreds of thousands or millions of plants in the Amazon,
right,
thousands of years ago or whenever, I think the origin dates are still to be determined.
Mm-hmm.
And just to firstly answer that question, I think what I've seen or suspect is that each of the ancient cultures seems to have some link with these plants. You often see blue lotus plants in Egyptian sort of hieroglyphs or carvings. Mm-hmm. You quite often hear of the tree of life,
right,
which people believe, Dennis McKenna gets into this, believes is an acacia tree, which is have many species that are highly containing, that have a lot of DMT in them.
Okay.
But this DMT molecule and the psilocybe molecule seem to have references in most ancient cultures.
Yeah.
They become apparent for those who study them. People can argue if they like, but it's hard to answer that question because, in a sense, each different people that use these things use them in from what we understand, quite a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be some cultures. For people listening, Julian Palmer, I think they'll get the website. You'll be able to get a lot more clarity on some of these topics by reading some of his articles and branching out, trying to find some people that are spending more time on this research than me. I'm still like in the space of clearing my own space to do this.
Yeah.
But like for instance, in the Amazon, some tribes there would be a shaman.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't facilitate other people necessarily. He would take the substances. He would go out into those other realms, and he would bring back the knowledge to heal the patient.
Right. Okay.
So he would speak with the spirit of ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
He would learn the Icarus, the song, or he would come back with the knowledge to help that person. We're doing it a little bit different in the West.
Yeah.
But it's not one of the areas that I would feel super comfortable giving information about. I just think it's really fascinating to read into these different cultures and find that it seems to be a really closely linked part of our past.
It is,
that these substances have really shaped a lot of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in the native culture, in North America anyways, I think with
peyote, is it?
Peyote, yeah. And I was interested to hear what you do, if anything, about those things. But I think the peyote is kind of, when a young man is becoming a man and they want him to realize himself or...
Well, when you met me, I was... and this may or may not have been a noticeable feature at the time, but very atheistic.
Right.
And very scientifically inclined.
Yeah, we briefly spoke about this the other day. So I didn't remember that from back then, but it makes sense. But so what has this done for you in terms of spirituality?
I have a sense of spirituality.
I guess you have any sense, because and whereas before you did not. You had no idea, or there was nothing.
I am not as certain as I once was, and I have much more open views on reality, I think. And when you tie that to something useful, it's making me better at listening to other people. Yeah. It's making me more accepting of them and more welcoming of them to be them around me. Mm-hmm. And that's led to a lot of deeper connections with people than I would ever have been capable of holding, which has been a real magic in my life. It's been really good.
And I think you kind of spoke to the connectivity of everyone, or just having a sense of purpose and realizing that we're kind of everyone's here in this together. And
the separation is false. We are all literally one.
Yeah.
Everything we do impacts each other, and it's hard to live a human life under that understanding, but it's been really useful to have moments of soma, if you like, or the that divine connection, to experience that for yourself. Is I think really, really powerful, to a reminder to let people be and accept their realities for how they view them.
Yeah. It's it would be a great thing if we could all feel a bit more that way, and and that's I guess that's what it was in back in the day, 60s, 70s. They were just like, everybody take this, and we'll all be perfect. We'll all love it. I think that's where it got a little bit out of control.
Well, look, for the most part, it's done some really good things, but
for sure,
Montezuma may have also executed 80,000 people because the war god told him to do so while he was taking mushrooms. Yeah. So, as I said, not for everyone.
Not for everyone. Yeah. How about yourself? Would you say you've experienced some bad trips or any really bad experiences taking these, or has there always been that? And is it a common thing where it starts scary, bad, like you said, work through it, let go, and then it kind of comes out the other side as something good?
I think there's a body load, right? Like these substances don't just operate psychedelically. I think one of the big shames about the lack of scientific research is that the physical healing of ayahuasca has not been examined well enough by our culture. It seemed, the process to me with most of the plant medicines, quote unquote, is, for me, they seem to work on the body first. So if I haven't prepared for a ceremony properly and been eating junk, I'll experience quite a difficult physical process, which may or may not involve like feeling like there's an immovable lump in your stomach and just kind of feeling bloated to needing to vomit.
Yeah.
On occasion needing to shit, which is very hard to figure out when you can't see 2 steps in front of you or there's dragons running through your skull.
Right.
But generally what I find is that once I've worked through the physical aspect of something, then the trip will sort of, the visions will start to come. It can be completely different for other people, but that's how I feel that the thing works. Is like, right, we're going to get to work on your body, we're going to get all the toxic crap out of there, and we're going to expel it, and then we'll sort of get to the emotional, spiritual stuff, know?
And you've found you've been able to control that first part of it if you are eating a healthy diet, a few days prior to an experience. It's been a bit easier.
People always have different attachments to the purge. I mean, that's essentially what it's called. But look, that's where the gold's at. That's why we're taking the stuff, to get that shit out of us.
Yeah.
So I think I've learned to love the vomit. Know, and I also know what's coming next, which is a physical relaxed sensation and the ability to delve into whatever it is I've set my intention on that time.
And is this for sure, like, you vomit every time you do this?
No. It's no. I mean, it's pretty common. A lot of that's going to depend on how big a dose you've taken, what the quality of the product is, how many tannins have been in the tea. There's different methods to make it easier for you, but I actually quite enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
I definitely understand the apprehension of non-drinkers around that side. It's just one of those things you've got to do. And you'll form your own opinion there, but don't be surprised if your opinion changes on it post fact.
Well, and I guess because that was one of the things my wife brought up when I talked to her, and she said, "Well, can't you get like really sick doing that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think sometimes people vomit or they even shit their pants." And she was like, "So why would you want to do that?"
because that's like your trauma pouring out your mouth. It's great. It's such
Yeah.
a cathartic feeling to get that out.
Yeah.
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 But,
I guess you
I've
got to
been in
experience it.
ceremony with 3 other people where when someone actually purged,
Mhm.
an applause went up. You know,
Yeah.
there was a happiness for that person. It's like, yes, you got it out. Well done.
Oh,
Big
man.
clap.
Yeah.
And it tends to be really warm, supportive environments because people are being cracked open. They're being themselves. They're talking about what hurts them, what has hurt them, what scares them. And it's just a really, in a sense, quite an addictive environment to be around because it becomes harder and harder to be around people who are being insincere.
Yeah.
You know, and you view that insincerity when it's coming out of you as well. And it gets harder to play that act that's been programmed in, and much more important to find out what I am, who am I, you know, like it's a surprisingly long tunnel down to figure that out sometimes, and for a lot of people don't realize how much they've been programmed into other people's ways of thinking.
Yeah.
That sort of evolved over centuries to become the society we live in, but none of it was designed by you, you know what I mean? Like, none of it. So it's like...
And so I briefly read some of that article you put on our Facebook thread about this guy giving back all his identification and stuff, and because, you know, it's not his, it was brought to him by someone else. He doesn't need it. Kind of, is that to do with you going off the grid, or?
He was one of the 3 celebrities.
Oh, that's one of the celebrities. Okay, gotcha.
Well, I was thinking in my mind, not so much because I don't think those thoughts, but I thought, like, if I have a platform to talk to other people, I want to put them onto things that I think is going to be useful.
Yeah. Well,
what this all builds into is complementing why I'd like to live off grid and why I'd like to take control over the production of my own life. I want it to be authentically mine.
Yeah. I
don't trust the society we live in to produce the kind of life that I would ultimately like to lead.
And you see, or I see a ton of it, people complaining about the society we live in or with the government and all this, and everybody's complaining about it, but they're not really doing anything to move away from it.
Shall we talk about Extinction Rebellion and my views on that?
I have a feeling we could talk about a lot of stuff for a long time, and a lot of it would be way over my head.
I think you sell yourself short, but whatever. For another time.
So, okay, well, let's quickly give. I told you we were going to do this thing, which these segments I sometimes do on my show. So we'll take a little break from the psychedelic talk, and then I want to get back into you explaining another experience that you had, your most profound one, maybe. Sure. But these fun segments
This is a complete shock to me, by the way. I didn't know you were going to do this at all.
I know, and not many people always do. And so I'm going to do this like you said. We were going to rank something.
Oh my God.
Rank something.
Oh my God.
Rank something. Which actually is a segment that has a sponsor, a friend of mine who started up a website called charitables.com, which is kind of like a Craigslist where you go to buy or sell things, but all the money moves through a charity. So if you're selling something, you put it up there, and whoever buys it, the money goes to the charity, not to the person selling it.
Well, it sounds better than Fleshlight.
Yeah, there you go. And so that's charitables.com, which is sponsoring us ranking our top 3 Australian celebrities, which I get the feeling our lists are going to be quite different.
Oh, it's all right. Who ranks first? You going first?
Yeah, I'll go first, and I'll start with my number 3. And I do have to give an honorable mention after this one that came from my wife. But my third favorite is a gentleman named Ben Simmons, who...
Hey!
You know Ben Simmons?
Oh, of course I do. I'm an NBA nut.
You are?
Yeah, just because I'm into spiritual stuff doesn't mean I can't watch the basketball.
Okay, that's good to know, because I was worried I'd have to give up all my sports and stuff. But
no, not at all.
So yeah, Ben Simmons, incredible basketball player. Lots of respect for him. And
can't shoot.
No, well, yeah, he doesn't really need to. He's got a couple guys on the team for that. And then number 2, I had a tie between Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. I couldn't decide, so I was going to make you the tiebreaker. Who gets my number 2 spot? The other guy's off the list. Hugh Jackman or Russell Crowe?
I'm going to go Hugh Jackman, just so that your supporters kind of have a balance of sport and theatre.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic anyway.
Obviously, Russell Crowe owning the South Sydney Rabbitohs rugby league team.
I didn't know that. And then my number one, only because I love the movie Moulin Rouge, and I used to have a bit of a crush on her. I thought she was pretty hot. Miss Nicole Kidman at my number one spot.
Well, that's completely understandable.
Yeah,
a bit of a trend there, bit of showbiz.
I know, right? Those are my celebrities that I know. You may have a few more influential people on your list, maybe. But
that's yet to be seen.
My honorable mention is Heath Ledger, because my wife has a huge crush on him, and that's who our son was pretty much named after. Our son's name is Ledger, so she made me get that. Well, let's hear who you're talking about.
It's like you planned that transition, because if I'm starting at number 3.
Wow.
And I obviously worked down from number 1, so by the time I got to number 3, I'm like, well, I better choose someone that someone actually knows.
Someone popular.
And I've appreciate his philosophy on life and how he was living his before he passed away. And that was, so number 3 was Heath Ledger for me.
Interesting.
He, surprisingly to me, seemed to live in an open shared house in America and was a regular attender of, what's that gathering out in the desert? That's become, I should know, Burning Man.
Burning Man.
So he was very much a burner and living a different life.
Really?
So, Heath Ledger at number 3 for me.
Right
and even as a straight bloke, I can happily admit that is a good-looking piece of man meat.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Bloody prick.
Yeah.
And, so then moving up to number 2, I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged an Indigenous person, being that's an issue quite close to my heart, and something that I would like other people to expand their knowledge and mind around in general, not anyone in particular. So I've chosen a man whose name is, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, Muramu Yidinji.
Yeah, I couldn't read it, so I'm surprised you even tried to say it.
He's he was under a different name. Obviously, that's not his white man's name.
Yeah.
But he was a reporter for a television station in Australia called SBS. I think he also did some work for one of the Indigenous TV channels.
Mm-hmm.
And his claim to fame initially was that, post that, was that he resigned his Australian citizenship. He's a traditional owner around the area that we now call Townsville in the Burdekin.
Okay.
And he's but him and his community have essentially declared their sovereignty to the UN. So they refuse to acknowledge Australian sovereignty over them. They've taken the number plates off their cars, made their own, put those on their cars. They don't pay any taxes. They've just decided, no, we don't recognize you.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was an incredibly brave thing to do. He's someone that I've been fortunate enough to meet. I met him in Townsville at a CDP conference.
Wow.
And was lucky to express my gratitude and appreciation for what he's done, and the authenticity with which they're pursuing their lives is again pretty inspiring, and I encourage anyone to read up on him. Pretty amazing man.
Yeah, that does seem pretty interesting and right on par with kind of what you're looking at, moving off the grid and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
Living life his way.
Yeah. Okay, and then moving on to number 1 is, I think, previously mentioned.
Yeah, look, I couldn't answer it any other way. So I know he had some women problems, but the impact on my life that Bill Mollison has had indirectly through others that have learned from him and his successes.
So mainly to do permaculture. What?
Yeah,
what would
he
you
was
say
a man who was.
Sorry,
he was a man that was getting immensely frustrated with the way in which the world was going.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably, back in the last quarter of, I don't know if it was the 70s or 80s that he started putting things together.
Okay.
But look, he gave up on society for a while. I feel like he sort of went bush, but he learned a lot about indigenous practices and land care practices, and sort of a lot of the principles of permaculture are a culmination of a scientific approach and an indigenous holistic approach.
Yeah. Okay.
Or if you like, of the land. Incidentally, so the indigenous languages, just to tie the thread between Muramu and Bill, is I've been told by an elder at one of the communities I worked in the Kimberley that a person was only considered wise once they learned 5 of the indigenous languages.
Wow.
And the reason that she gave me for that being the case is that the way their language works is much different to ours. It's, an oak tree in my house has a completely different name from an oak tree down by the river, because the word they would use would be attached to its function or purpose in the chain of life. So essentially their language was permaculture instructions that's handed down from generation to generation. That's, why it's so sad that Australia, the authorities that be, have all but stamped out many of the languages, because in stamping those languages out, you have lost 60,000 plus years of land care information in this country. So in a sense, Bill's work is to put some of that back together and try to train us Westerners and anyone who'll listen, really, on how we can approach some of the problems we've got in our world. And his favorite quote of mine is, although and I'm it's not going to be verbatim, but although the problems of the world are becoming infinitely more complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple.
Yeah.
We need to eat, we need love, we need a roof. And sometimes we don't even need a roof.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't need to eat. It's really simple. We just got to keep breathing and be nice to people, and the world becomes a really easy place.
Yeah. That would be something, eh? If everybody could just, be nice, help.
Sometimes
help
you get to see it in smaller communities, and you go, "Why the fuck would I go back to the city?"
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just kind of that simple.
Yeah,
it's just our problems are complicated. How do we extract ourselves from the lives that we have? Where do we start? It's not that easy, especially when you have kids.
Yeah. Okay, and quickly, just to get through this before we get back to the fun stuff, your favorite song ever. Did you pick this one just because you're on a Canadian podcast?
Look, Leonard Cohen was my de facto father.
Yeah?
He would be who I would listen to when I was upset or sad. It was hard because it's probably not my favorite song. Okay. So I kind of lied.
Yeah, that's everybody does.
It contains my favorite ever lyric.
Okay. Which one is that?
There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Yeah, I
loved by many.
Listened to it, and that really struck a chord with me too, as I'm sure it does a lot of people. But it is a beautiful lyric from an amazing Canadian poet. Good guy.
Very special person, and the only celebrity that's passed away that's made me cry.
Really?
I was just very happy he was ready for it, and that he was able to tell us that before he left.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well,
but I also, favorite song. How do you do that? It changes all the time. Right now,
it
LP Lost on You is the most amazing thing that's ever hit my ears.
Really?
But that will change.
Yeah.
I find her amazing. Yeah.
LP. I'll have to listen to that one. Is it a pop tune?
I wouldn't call it pop. No. I don't know. She's like very clearly a lesbian woman who's got a really strong personality and a fucking amazing voice.
Yeah. I can put some of the song underneath us here in post-production, so I'll do a little bit of that too. But
cool.
So, okay, back to the fun stuff. Given you've said you do have quite a recollection of many of these experiences, is there one that you rank number one as the most important
there's
one
you've been
through? Or?
Probably three that I could describe relatively quickly.
Yeah, okay.
That would build a picture, I think.
Let's do it.
This is like another extended extended sponsorship ranking your 3 favorite psychedelic experiences.
That's right. Another rank something. Yeah. I will not have a list for you yet, though.
Cool. So in no particular order.
Yeah.
Except for chronological. Right. So we sat down, we drank ayahuasca, and I was going to get healed. This was my perspective, like this is the big mother healer. And if it's anything like DMT, holy hell, it's going to sort me out.
Yeah.
Sit down in a beautiful location in what felt like a really safe space that had been created by the same individual, with no claims of being a shaman, just someone who thought these were useful and could be of benefit. So I was there with 3 other men. And drank the first cup, hour and a half later, getting a bit bored. Watching everyone else around me have these amazing experiences, and for me, they're just nothing. Sat around for a while, drank the second cup, felt like I was a distraction to the others, felt fidgety. So I went up to the facilitator who had previously asked us not to leave the circle unless we had to.
Yeah.
Mostly because it would just distract him from what was going on in space. But it was pretty clear to him when I went up to him and asked if he might have. I just went down to the lake for a little while, that I was not under any influence at that time. So he's like, yep, that's fine. So I wandered down to the lake and rolled a smoke and had a cigarette. Looked up at the lake, and I remember my internal dialogue. It was exactly what I just said. Like, this isn't going to work. I was disappointed. But that disappointment immediately broke way to okay, well, if this isn't going to fix me, I'm just going to have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And as soon as those words rolled through my head, click of the fingers, bang, it kicked in. And I could see these energy contours in the sky connecting up with what was on the ground. And when I went back to circle, I could see these lights of energies pouring into the other 3 people and receiving back up. And the whole world just looked like a different place. And from that sort of moment, all that idea of being 30 years old and being broke, being overweight, being undesirable for all these fake sort of pressures and expectations that don't actually exist, which had been exposed to me on that previous DMT trip. It kind of made things easy. I'm like, well, if that's not the purpose, then what's the fucking point? What are we meant to do? And the answer immediately an answer popped into my head immediately, which was simply try and make it possible for other people to come to these understandings themselves, because it feels like a place that people want to be. It's a nice place.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything profoundly psychedelic that happened for me. I had no desire to shut my eyes after that. I was just able to sit calmly in a strong pose with these other 3 men and begin to explore the idea of holding space for others. But I wouldn't know that that's what I was doing until later. But this sort of contentment with where I'm at and what's around me, it was a familiar thread in a lot of these conversations.
I think so, yeah. And that kind of, I feel like, almost lends itself into the topic of ego, which I hear a lot in this realm. And that's kind of, letting your ego go.
It's a really wordy click, isn't it? There's a lot of language that you kind of got to get your head around.
But ego is one that I keep hearing about that I'm trying to understand. But I feel like it's this all-encompassing thing of yourself, or the ego and the self. Is that kind of hand in hand, or I don't know?
I've gone through various iterations of understanding what ego means to me.
Yeah.
It's not so much a focus for me. But look, I guess my initial understanding of ego was that which protects you from what you're not ready for yet. Yeah. So there's certain things that you can't handle. Your ego flares up and it starts shutting the door. But I think as I've developed an understanding that there's another word or words for that, and it's like coping mechanisms. Right? Yeah. How do you cope with shit? How do you respond? And it's almost like your emotional reaction to things. that initial emotional reaction in parts that, or in some case, a permanent emotional reaction just stops you from exploring certain areas or ideas. The problem with the ego is not so much in the sense that it's not trying to protect you, in my view. It's that it was designed and put in place by a child. These are often coping mechanisms that a 2-year-old came up with or a 5-year-old came up with. So you'll hear in these spaces a lot of the talk of letting go of that which no longer serves you. And there is a scientific bridge if people would like to understand it. It may require some research for some, but others might be there already. These substances increase the neuroplasticity of your brain quite substantially and can leave that effect for periods of days or weeks after the fact.
Right.
So it actually allows you a chance to reprogram some of these things. And when people refer to doing the work, which is a very vague instruction, it's almost that, like if you go into these ceremonies and use these substances and you find out all this information about yourself or have this download, as people call it, of information, it can seem incredibly profound as you go through it. But if you're not going to change your life afterwards, you ain't going to feel any different. Like the physical and the emotional are counterpoints, I believe, to each other. And if you neglect one, the other's going to suffer at some point. So, yeah, I know ego work. Apart from the idea of, and this is a real Australian thing, so I apologise if I just offend half the audience. If you're being a cunt, this stuff's going to show you that you can be a different person.
Yeah.
But if you don't sort of give yourself the space and integrate the sort of exercises, whether it's yoga or going for a walk or consciously slowing down and meditating a little bit or whatever it is, eating better. Eating better is a big one. You're not going to maintain, you're not likely going to maintain the benefit of these substances.
What did that work look like to you? Or what is some of the work that you've had to do or you've been...
I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I'm just in a much better place about how I figure it out now.
Okay.
Like part of moving off grid, and people can call this mumbo jumbo if they like, is I was starting to be seriously impacted by the amount of humming noise in cars and people shouting and generally just like massive amounts of electromagnetic radiation floating around the place.
Yeah.
And as you start to look into that scientifically, it's not great, Like this is not shit that it lands on your body and it fundamentally changes your energy levels. And I was finding it really hard to be productive. So part of my work, in a sense, was coming out to nature to allow that to help me.
Yeah,
to be around, to be in the energy and the trees and have the opportunity to plant things. But I think when I do body work, so when I wake up and I spend some time with my breath and I spend some time feeling what my body's doing, then I generally put myself in a pretty good place. I just don't do it as much as I'd like, like being conscious of the music you've got on. Like, are you just listening to shit you're used to listening to? Are you putting the kind of frequency out there that will make you feel more calm, that'll make you feel more like you? There's, incenses and scents that can assist with that.
Yeah.
Rather than being mindlessly hippie-ish about it, you can actually sort of find the ones that resonate with you and that put you in different moods and headspaces. And so my partner's much better at that than I am. So I'm lucky that she kind of sets those atmospheres better than I do. But we're still finding, in terms of the sense and the music, I kind of just float around unconsciously.
Yeah.
I don't know, just being more at peace with what I think and not worrying so much about what other people think.
Yeah,
I'm not
of course
always there, but I've got a better grounding in that side of life, I think.
Yeah, right on, man. Okay, well, let's head then chronologically to this next experience.
So the next experience was an accident, and it was back on the DMT pipe.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough after my first experience to be offered to buy some if I would like a gram. So I bought some. This meant I fucking had DMT at my own house.
Yeah,
I could do it whenever I wanted to.
Yeah. Maybe not a good idea on your own, though, or I guess still.
whatever, each to their own. It wasn't
yeah.
something that I was worried about, but
Yeah.
it's not something I would advise other people to necessarily do. Although I think if you can do these substances by your own, it can be immensely more rewarding.
Yeah.
And again, I'll send you a link on some people's views about that.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's a hot topic within the community. People have wildly diverging points of view. Yeah, so I'd been taking a few microdoses in the evening, because one thing I really think is good with DMT is, for someone who doesn't have the patience to meditate, the smallest fraction of the substance has that effect of putting your focus on your breath. So it was a really effective way for me to actually start meditating.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for about a week and not smoking very much at all. And then these experiences last all of 2 minutes. They're just quick shortness of breath out of your system, gone. So one time I put too much in and very quickly had to go to my room before it sort of all set in. I lay down on my bed and I got shot off. So one of the things McKenna talks about are these dwarves or elves, these machine elves.
Yeah.
So I went through some time where they kind of were floating around doing their thing, and that sort of disappeared, and I went somewhere else, maybe a bit more astrally inclined. Anyway, where I ended up quite quickly was this place of nothing. I wouldn't even say black, because it was beyond black. It was like I wasn't there, and the only way that I could know was that my consciousness would flicker into this darkness and then flicker out, and I was gone, and it absolutely terrified me. It was the most scared I've ever been, except for maybe half drowning, I tried to pull myself out of that experience with every fiber of my body and mind, and ultimately succeeded in dragging myself back through the same layers I'd just gone through. So back through the astral, back into past these elf thingy-majiggies, who were actually quite pleasant, quite entertaining and jovial most of the time.
Yeah.
But when I got back to my bed, there was no difference between my eyes being open and closed. So even if I had my eyes closed, I still saw my bedroom, which was interesting. And as I came back into that space, there was and I've spoken about this in another interview that'll be released in a documentary, hopefully later this year.
Cool.
But I may as well sort of repeat it in Cliff Notes. That entity was, and this, being an American originally, it maybe has some significance, but it was a totem pole with, well, it wasn't a totem pole. It was a real thing as far as I was concerned. It had an eagle's head. It took up the whole wall. It was in three-dimensional, well, not three-dimensional, but as far as it looked, it was in three-dimensional space.
Yeah.
Like a hologram. Had huge, big feathered wings. And it was basically, it wasn't talking. These things rarely do, it seems. They kind of just put understandings in your head or words in your head. And it simply told me that, look, it's okay. You don't have to be ready yet. And just with the slightest movement of each of its feathers at their tips, contorted every molecule in the room. You could see it rippling through the walls and up through the air and the bed and the sheets. And every molecule just gave me the warmest hug I've ever had in my life. I was being hugged by the universe itself, and it was just letting me know that you're fine. It's not like you're fine. You're safe. And it just, I can't explain how that felt physically. It was incredibly emotionally cathartic, and rescued me out of that fear. So I owe quite a lot to that element of either what's inside me or that entity. That was, I got to know what love was, which was really, really cool.
And so just something that jumps out after that experience is kind of, how do you think, or why so many people describe a lot of very similar things when they're going through these experiences? Which to me, not that it doesn't make sense, but it seems, it's very interesting that so many people are seeing similar things when people are so different.
A lot of people are determined to believe that this is all inside of them. and these are just hallucinations that are taking place. And I'm sure there's an element of that, but and I was one of those people up until very, very recently. I still kind of am, if that makes sense. It becomes a difficult conversation because I don't expect people to accept anyone else's explanation of a new reality that they're not used to. But really, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation for why people have the same experiences is because these are real places.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I don't understand how that can be, you know. But the alternative explanation is much more mucky and complicated.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, like I think there's something else there, and what that is and how we interface with it, I don't know. But like, just like a dog can't see colors, why do we assume we can see everything in the world when we are starting to talk about quantum physics and alternative dimensions?
Yeah.
We really have no understanding of how the universe works. We just like the comfort of our perceived control of things.
And so kind of saying that the dog probably thinks he can see everything too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He doesn't know any different. He thinks he can see the whole world. Or maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a dog.
Yeah, me neither. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let's get into that third experience then.
Yeah. So which one was I going to choose? Let's have to rack my brain. I didn't want to get into a lot of the entity stuff because I think that's probably relevant for a different audience.
Right. Yeah.
So we've done the ayahuasca, we've done that DMT experience. Oh, well, I suppose we're entering it slightly if I include this third experience. So not after I'd left the Kimberley, I ended up taking a job working on Palm Island, which is the largest Indigenous community in Australia, just off the east coast, around Townsville. Yep. And then spent a year designing a program from the ground up, which I was very proud of, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, the reason I'd applied for a job over there is because I'd met a woman that I was very interested in, and after 2 years living in the middle of, as we said, bumfuck nowhere, where single women are not that easy to come by, I was pretty eager to indulge in this sudden femininity that I was allowed to put my hands on.
Yeah.
That incidentally is not who I'm with now, but it became quite a detour in a way, and right from the get-go, when I was about to travel from Kununurra to Townsville, we encountered quite a lot of problems, and we're starting to run into issues around monogamy, et cetera, but on her behalf, not mine. Yeah. And I decided one day that I needed to get back face-to-face and have a chat with her, or else things were probably going to end.
Yeah.
So I told my job that I was no longer working there, which fortunately took really well. Hopped in the car, packed up the car, and drove. Was preparing to drive about what would be 3,500 kilometers.
Yeah.
Across the top end of Australia, which I've done 6 times now. It's quite a nice process.
I bet.
So I drove about 1,800 or 1,000 kilometers on the first day. Pulled up for the night, and I was an emotional fucking wreck. A friend of mine had given me a little bit of DMT or Changa or whatever it was, enhanced leaf, and I was planning on saving it for the both of us. And eventually, I just was so anxious that I'm like, fuck it, you know what? I've got this medicine in the car. Yeah. I'm in a beautiful place. I'm just going to lie down in the back of the forest there and use it. So I rolled up a joint. And I had another one as a backup because I still wanted to save some for her. And, put some intention into it, you know, which is, I think, another important thing that people can learn to do, which was, my intention was to find where the fuck my love had gone, because I just couldn't find it. I just felt hurting, pain, agony, you know, all of that emotional turmoil that your juvenile emotional state goes through when you go through a breakup. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have, but a lot of people do.
Of course.
I certainly have. And what it showed me, like, it was clear to me that I was in my chest, and it was really dark. Until, like, almost as if my psychedelic eyes were adjusting, I started to see little thin movements in this orb thing. If that provides any kind of clear picture. And as I kept focusing, what I was seeing was these black shadows rotating around a circular object with incredible speed. And then I began a dialogue with these things. And as I did so, I could see little thin cracks of light shining out as they started listening. What became really clear to me is that what they were circling around was my love, so to speak. It was this really warm, golden, glowing, powerful energy of just calm, soothing acceptance. Yep. So this dialogue goes on, and I don't know what the hell to say to them, and what I ended up sort of getting out is that basically you guys can't stay here, and for some reason the fear went away. And it wasn't an issue of judging them or fearing them. They didn't seem to be malevolent. They just seemed to be doing their thing, and they'd found this source of energy, maybe this food or whatever it is that they want from it. And as they were spotted and identified, and there's a metaphor here if you don't want to believe it empirically, as I asked them to move elsewhere, they did. I asked them, you can't be here. I don't, I appreciate whatever, I hope you've had a fun time, but fuck off.
Yeah. And they did.
And as they start flying away, this bright, glowing orb of energy returns, and I come out of it. Basically went to sleep after that, but woke up the next day with no anxiety, no depression, drove 18 hours straight, sorted things out with this person, and had a huge cathartic release a couple of days later, just where I broke down in these joyous tears that seemed to be letting go of a lot of pent-up physical stress. So that was when I kind of thought, wow, this stuff's a really powerful tool.
Yeah. And so a topic jumps into my head after that one is kind of that it's not a one-time quick fix and then you're cured for life or everything's perfect.
I would think to go into it with that attitude would be foolish.
Yeah, of course.
It's not that doesn't happen for some people, but that's not the common story. Most people that I've seen get very little out of their first experience, and it's quite a lot to process. I don't think you need to be tripping off in outer space regularly to do work, but I think that if people are wanting to expand the space to be themselves, so to speak, and they want to heal shit that's hard, I think that you can start searching out things that have done this for other people. And just start trying. There's lots of different ways. There's Iboga for people that are trying to deal with heroin addictions. There's MDMA therapy for people that are struggling to express themselves in their relationships. There's high doses of psilocybin. There's high dose cactus. There's high dose ayahuasca. People start wandering into these fields. It's just up to you to gather the information that works for you, and that really is what it has to be. And if we come back to what makes a good facilitator, someone who's honestly trying to connect you with your own sense of help.
Yeah, not someone who's got their view of the world and they want to implement that on you. But
they can have their view of the world, but they should be prepared, in my eyes, to state what that view is and let you know what their issues are so that you can make an informed choice.
Yeah, I appreciate how open you are about all this, and this is something completely new for this podcast. I'm sure a lot of my listeners are like, "What the fuck is going on?"
I'm not an out there weirdo.
I can attest to that. I know.
To take that up online. I'm happy to sort of break it down how I've come to where I am. It's a surprise to me, but I am a much kinder, more open, more useful person.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard to.
I think it's pretty evident.
You can call that crazy. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine to be crazy.
Yeah.
If you're benefiting people and yourself, who's got the right to judge it? And that's essentially why these things, they should not be illegal.
Yeah,
that's pretty clear. Like if I hadn't taken these, quite literally may have taken my life. I hope not, but that's where it was heading.
Yeah, it's a
and
scary
that's where it's been heading for a lot of people. Yeah.
Right. Well, like I said, I'm really thankful that you would come on here and open up so much about this.
No, it's my pleasure.
Before I cut you off, is there anything else you wanted to put out to my listeners, or just even to me? Anything?
Yeah, look, if you're interested, stay in touch. It's not like there shouldn't be any barriers to seeking out information. I'll figure out what the best contact details are, and by the time this goes up, hopefully they'll be in the links.
Yeah, for sure.
What I'm up to at the moment is trying to start a conservation nursery between two properties. So we're hoping to put about 30 acres into planting out specific acacias that are either under threat or very useful in these spaces.
Okay.
So it's Australian ayahuasca, if you like.
Yeah.
A lot of people harvest these plants in a pretty unsustainable, selfish fashion. It kills lots of trees, and of course, half the country just burned down. So we've lost a lot of these plants, and there's no reason to really trust that we're not going to be going through these fires for years to come. So we've got the support of landowners. We've got about 800 various seeds planted now. We hope to start putting them in the ground around April or May. And I will have a page that follows that journey, which will be, I think we're going to call the Facebook page Arc of Embodiment Acacia Conservation Project.
Yeah, right on.
And then once I get a little bit more fluent, there'll be a website, www.arcofembodiment.com. So
very cool.
I'll hopefully be able to have a little story for people to follow, and I'll try and get as many resources or links to knowledgeable people in these fields that I trust, so that if people want to engage more, you'd be surprised how friendly these people are. They're there to help.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, I wish you nothing but the best, for sure. And I'm really glad we've reconnected, and we'll stay in touch, and I'm sure we'll do another podcast eventually.
I would like that a lot. Yeah.
I got to get my kids to piano lessons here soon, I think. So that's why I got to cut you off.
Worries.
But man,
let's put a line through it and stay in touch.
Yeah, you guys, if you want to check out anything that Devon's doing, we'll share some of those links, especially some of the further information he thought people should check out. I'll share those links. And then once that Facebook page and website's up, let me know, and I'll share that for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, we really call it the AC show. Really call it the AC show. It's the AC show. It's the AC show with AC, your host. Check it out.